On PM Express tonight, slain Ahmend Suale, guarding the fourth estate. A very important question that we'll be trying to answer tonight. How do we do this in a country where democracy is so entrenched? We celebrate it across the globe, but we've recorded one of the lowest points in our democratic history since 1992, and even in the history of this country. We're interrogating that. What happened? We know that Ahmend Suale, an undercover journalist, worked with the Tiger IPI team. They've done several investigative work, the latest one being the number 12 documentary, exposed corruption in football across the continent, celebrated even by FIFA. No wonder FIFA issued a statement condemning his killing. He was shot twice in the chest, one in the neck, just last week, Wednesday, just around 10 p.m. in his own Medina community. Police started investigations into this with several questions. The homicide unit took over the investigations. I mean, they do that because of the expertise that they have. Immediate suspicion in the immediate aftermath of the murder focused on this man and the accusations. In fact, a lawyer for the Tiger IPI team went on radio and asked that he be invited. Progress has been made on that front. He denies that, by the way, that he has anything to do with this. And the linkage to him traces from his own public comments on this matter in the wake of the release of the number 12 documentary, in which he also did a counter documentary, held a big event because he's a media owner himself. That's another thing we'll be interrogating tonight. Put his pictures up and ask people to cause him harm. Family of the journalist want justice today. They held a press conference yesterday asking the police to be up and doing. For they're calling the public, international agencies to assist the police get to the bottom of this. We see varied reactions coming through and condemnations. Former President Rawlings has had his say on this. He says Ahmed's killing cannot be like the others we've seen. Why is he saying that? We've seen several murders that you could call them cold cases, haven't been sort of closed. Today, my colleague reminded me of a case way back in the day that hasn't been exhausted. Another media person, Ken Agyapong, remember that? He was also murdered. Nothing has happened. Former President Mahama also raises questions about it. Government and security agencies must work to deal with this, get to the bottom of this. Nana Akufo, the current president, has also spoken about it, expecting the police to bring to book those who killed the journalist. Internationally, again, we've seen U.S. Congressman Hank Johnson has condemned the shooting. They're asking the State Department to step in and look into it as well and investigate it. He's demanding that the conduct of an independent assessment is done, but also recommending international travel ban on Ken Agyapong. We know that he also questioned the quality and scope of the Ghanaian government's investigation into the matter because of the involvement of a key member of the government. And fascinatingly, we've seen key members of this government and the party defending him on social media and in mainstream media. They also want sanctions against Ken Agyapong. The UN has been speaking over the weekend. They say that the revulsion at this cannot be hidden. Calls for prompt, thorough, and transparent investigations that come from the UN as well. We know that the UN says failure to bring perpetrators to justice creates a climate of impunity. And this is something we'll be talking about. Remember that we had the show last week, similar to this one, on which we talked about the several assault cases against journalists. Then journalists were being beaten up, assaulted verbally, etc. And we called for action. Nothing seemed to have happened. Now we are talking about a funeral. Somebody has passed on. We know that a minority today held a press conference. They won the Assistant Central MP Ken Agyapong, that government watched on for him to travel. They want him arrested and picked. There appears to be a trend of contract killings. They say they point to the statistics that show a setting, worsening of the security situation across the country. We'll be exploring this today with my guests in the studio. We'll be exploring this particular part of the topic, guarding the fourth estate of the realm. Can we say, after what has happened with Ahmend Suale, that this is the last time this will ever happen in this country? But how do we put pressure on the police, the system, to get justice for him? Should we do things as usual, or it's time for the journalist fraternity, the media, generally, the fourth estate of the realm to come together and do something differently? We'll be talking to my guests when we return from this break. Stay with us here on PM Express. You're live on PM Express. My guest tonight with me in the studio is Suleiman Briamah. He's Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Sule, thank you very much for your time here on PM Express. Also with us in the studio is Kenneth Ashigbey, Media Rights Advocate and CEO of the Ghana Chamber of Telecommunications. He's a former MD of the Graphic. He's been at this for a long time. We'll be joined also by Mustafa Idris, who's a spokesperson of the Ahmend Suale's family. They held a press conference. He addressed it yesterday, and they said that the reason why they are going to fight is not only for Ahmend Suale because he's the one who suffered this unfortunate incident, but also because for the other journalists who may face similar threats. And so they're raging a campaign, using his death as a platform, as a basis to campaign for justice, not only for him, but for the many other journalists who have been assaulted, but also even journalists across the country who may feel at risk. They want this to be the last time this will ever happen. And before we start, I want to read a very latest statement that came in tonight from the police, giving us an update on the investigations into Ahmend Suale's murder. And I quickly want to go through some of the key points. And this is an update. First update, the police say they have the words they use interrogated Honorable Ken Agyapong. He's a member for Assin Central, and a statement has been taken from him. And we talked about that in the intro, why that has become necessary. We knew that, but what we didn't know is the second point they make, which is that detectives, a team of detectives and other experts have also interrogated Mr. Kwesi Nyantakyi, former president of the Ghana Football Association, in a statement taken from him. Again, why is that necessary? Because we know that the questions that the investigators must be asking themselves is who is likely to harm him. And if you're asking that question, you have to draw a list. And it appears from what the police are doing that they think that Kwesi Nyantakyi could be a person of interest. And so they've interrogated him. You remember that Hussein Suale, particularly, because we had access to the Nyantakyi's statement to the police, he mentioned Suale's name as part of that sting operation that ended up in Dubai. And we saw footage of that secretly taking, in which he was giving some money, which triggered his fall from grace to grass, really. And so he's been interrogated. Also, the CID has, and stating, quoting here, and continues to interrogate other persons of interest, as well as following up on multiple significant leads. He says the CID urges the general public to provide information. At the end of the bulletin, at the end of this program, I'll put out the numbers and to be on your screen so you can help with information if you have it. But most importantly, the police is assuring us that the CID commits to a thorough investigation of high integrity in this case in particular, and all other unresolved crimes in general. And they promise that updates and outcomes of these investigations will be made known to the general public as they become available and appropriate to do so. It is signed by David Declue, Assistant Commissioner of Police, Director of General Public Affairs. Sule, what's your reaction to this latest update? Is it comforting to know at least that we are getting somewhere with investigations?
Well, it's welcoming. It's important that given the profile of the case, the public is assured that at least the security agencies are at it. And that's also the only way perhaps citizens and other well-wishers may be able to volunteer any information that they may have or any clues, even if it is not related directly to the incident. So I think that we must commend the police at this stage for at least keeping us updated on the developments around it. At least through this, we know that they've had interactions with Mr. Nyantakyi, with Honorable Ken Agyapong, and I'm sure that in the coming days, perhaps we will hear more of what the police is doing.
Your reaction?
Well, I think similarly, I tend to agree with that. At least this is a freshness that we're getting. That at least in this particular case, you know, they seem to be following through, and I hope that they would continue this in terms of giving us information. Because in as much as the police would expect that the public would volunteer information, the public would also want to be able to get some feedback on exactly what it is that they're doing. So far as that information does not compromise the investigations that they are carrying out, I think this definitely is a step in the right direction. The only thing I would want to ask them is that on the 12th of November, when one of their own assaulted a Metro TV person, which was caught on camera, and they have that, it would be good for them to also tell us what is happening to all of that as well. It's not only this particular one, but we need to realize that there's been a lot of attacks that has culminated in this also happening.
And that's a very important point to raise. And really, that's why we are having this conversation. And you raised that. I also remember my colleague Lateef Idris, who was also beaten and assaulted by police officers in front of the police headquarters, ironically.
Yes.
And some have heard people say that if the police, the military have also been involved in assaulting journalists, they beat up journalists, there are no consequences. Why shouldn't ordinary people, like the guys on the motorbikes who have done this very heinous crime, think that the police do it and get away with it? They beat up journalists. Some of them are hospitalized for months. In the case of Lateef, he was away for months. Almost half a year of his working life was gone because of that. Why shouldn't others do same? Isn't that part, I guess, a central part of the problem?
I think that's the problem. On my blog, if you go on my blog, and I think I also posted on Facebook, let me read what I wrote. Know that if we continue the way we are going now, very soon we'll be attending a funeral of a journalist who will be beaten and killed in his line of duty. This was on the 13th of November, and it's exactly so. It's the fact that there's been no repercussions at all for political parties and their people when they beat us, the police themselves, the military. We've had situations where families and relatives of suspects, when journalists go to cover events at the courts, are beating. We've had sports people, including Bafojan, beat up journalists and all of that. And it's resulted in where we are today. There's one group that has said that they recorded 31 beatings of journalists in 2018 alone.
I think it's Media Foundation West Africa, right? They did the record.
Exactly. And so all of, so there's a record of the fact that things happen and the reaction is not the same. So it emboldens people to decide that this is how we're going to go. And for me, the thing that all of us should do is to say that it is said, and rightly so, that any group of people who think that they can, go a particular way and expect different results are fools. So we need to say that, no, journalists, media people, we're not fools. We realize the fact that if you take empirical evidence about the way in which we've handled beatings of journalists, and Evans, this is not the first time. This is like the third or fourth time I'm sitting in this studio discussing this particular issue. So we have to completely change the way we handle this. And for me, we now have martyrdom happening today, and it has to be just like, when the 3 judges and the major were killed, it became the point where we drew the line in the sands that never again. We should also take this to say we're going to preserve the lives of journalists today and those in the future, and say we are not going to go the way we've gone again. People like the NMC, the GJA, all of us, we need to change what it is that we have been doing in the past. And especially for journalists who are currently, practicing, we have to decide that we also bear a responsibility for things like this that has happened.
So like the Media Foundation for West Africa, thankfully, you don't only work in Ghana, you work across the continent, sub-region, etc. And how does this compare with what you've seen elsewhere? Because I've heard people this week say, and in the minority made a point today, and others, that this is the lowest we've sunk in our recent history, arguably even in our history, when it comes to press freedom.
Well, you're right that we don't work just here in Ghana. And because of the historical conditions in Ghana, recognized as a country that is doing so well in our democratic processes and also in our press freedom rankings, over the years, I think in the last 4, 5, or 6 years, if I'm right, Ghana has always been at the top in terms of countries designated as being free when it comes to press freedom. Well, in all these analyses, killing of a journalist is a significant factor in the ratings. And I'm saying this because I happen to be part of both the Reporters Without Borders analysis and also Freedom of the Press Index by the US-based Freedom House. Now, Ghana has always been where it is because, governmental control, direct government interference, we didn't have that. We had repealed criminal libel law. There were not significant instances of severe, violations against journalists. And here I'm talking about torture, people disappearing, and so on and so forth. And I think that this particular incident is a significant one. But also we need to discuss it in a very dispassionate manner, so that we don't preempt anything, we don't prejudice anything, and we don't begin to influence how the public think of the media and the particular issue we are talking about. And it is on that basis that I would say we need to be at this stage a bit cautious in concluding that Mr. Suale was murdered because of his work. Yes, we are right to assume so. And I believe that it may be right to assume 70% that, or even more, that this is perhaps as a result of his works.
And there's a very important point, because if you look at the police statement so far, they seem to be proceeding on that assumption.
Exactly.
That, because you look at the people they said they've interviewed, interrogated, the word they use, all of them have to do with Suale's work.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, and I think that it is important in our conversations around this. That for me is one of the key points. But touching on the national and regional picture, currently there are 4 uninvestigated cases of murders of journalists in Nigeria.
Okay.
When we raised this, somebody said, well, in Nigeria, because Nigeria's population is almost 200 million. So you're talking about 50 million per one in that case. So if 4 is to 200 million, we have about 30 million, and this particular incident has happened. Not to say that, therefore, it is insignificant. I think it is significant. So in terms of murders of journalists, I think so far the records are in Nigeria, where 4 incidents happened in 2016, 2017, and now we have 1 here. Apart from that, we don't have any record indicating that a journalist has been murdered. Perhaps some could happen and it hasn't come to our attention. Now, beyond the issues that Ken was raising, this afternoon we put out a statement indicating...
Let's clarify the Ken, by the way. Ken Ashigbey.
Ken Ashigbey.
Ken Agyapong.
Yes.
Because we'll be talking
Ashigbey.
about that shortly. Yes.
You see, just this afternoon we issued a statement talking about Suale's death and the 3 important critical issues about safety of journalists in Ghana.
Tell me about it.
And these 3, we pointed to 1, state failure.
Okay.
2, inertia on the part of the media.
Okay.
And 3, what we called undignified compromises.
Okay, let's take one, because each you can discuss it for a whole topic.
Exactly.
Let's start with the first part.
So the point we are making is that over the last 4 years, our data indicates that there have been 62 incidents of attacks against journalists.
Okay, 62?
Yes.
2 years?
Yes, no, 4 years.
4 years, okay.
But that translates to more than 1 journalist attacked per month. And that is really significant. Now,
in Ghana?
Yes, in Ghana.
If you didn't say that, I wouldn't know.
Yes, in Ghana. And perhaps there are other incidences that we may not have even captured. But our database has 62 incidents of attacks against journalists. Now, on all these, none has resulted in any conviction, any open state prosecution, and so on and so forth. And that, for us, constitutes a failure on the part of the state. And there have been, some of these cases have been quite high profile, that you would expect that the state will step in. And by state, if the police should act, that's the state. For example, we raised the point why the state failed to act when Ken said what he said about Suale. I think that in any law-abiding society, I cannot just sit here and say that this person is a bad person. If you should come around, beat him up, if anything happens, I'll take care of it. And then I'll go scot-free. Whether or not the matter was even reported to the police by the guy or by his team is another matter. But in any responsible society, I mean, action should have been taken. Yeah. There have been, there was this instance of 4 journalists attacked at the headquarters of the MPP. This was early last year. We petitioned the party, there was no response. We petitioned the CID, the IGP. The IGP referred the matter to the CID. We were invited, myself and our colleague in charge of press freedom, we were invited to the CID headquarters to write our statements. We did. We promised they will follow up, and we've heard nothing. There's the Latif incident. 2015, there was this incident by Standowe, and nothing happened. So some of these cases have been high profile, and yet the state fails to act. Whether or not it is because of the political influences of the individuals involved or not. But the most important thing is the impunity, the culture of impunity that we then nurture and grow.
As a result of that, because there's no consequence.
Because people beat up journalists, nothing happens. Police officers beat journalists, military officers beat journalists, political party activists beat journalists, and nothing happens. And therefore, people then assume that as for journalists, you can
beat them and get away with it.
And nothing happens. And so people then are encouraged and emboldened to take such dastardly acts as what happened to our brother.
But Ken, on that point of failure of the state, we'll come to our own responsibility. Then the third one you mentioned. In fact, I want the third one come because I want to focus quite heavily tonight on our own responsibility. If the state is failing and other agencies are, we cannot fail ourselves. And that's where we'll focus a bit of the conversation. But Ken, first on the first bit that Suale mentions about the state's failure. And he mentions Ken Agyapong's utterances then. The party people applauded him. I'm talking about the ruling government people applauded him. In fact, tonight, when the minority guys asked that, because they quoted the law and mentions that even on the back of what has happened, immediately that you pick him up. You don't allow him to travel, you because of what he had said. Even if it doesn't directly result, just a mere threat to cause harm alone should be enough for somebody to act. I spoke to the information minister who said, well, he's a subject of investigation, and so we cannot publicly condemn because he's being investigated, and you don't want to stampede the process. But that's where we are. There's always a way for the politicians to explain why they cannot take action against their own who make these pronouncements and assault journalists.
Well, it's a shame, and I think it's good, like, with what my brother just said, the fact that the state has really, we've allowed the state, that's the way I would say it, is for us journalists, we have allowed the state. And let me bring you, multimedia, on the situation where GJ, and GJ, we've known GJ have not been very forceful when it comes into their issues. The issue of Latif, when GJ decided on this particular occasion, we're going to boycott an event by the IGP because of the fact that we're not seeing any results. What happened? We had multimedia itself go to cover this event. So I will blame us journalists for the fact that we have allowed our newsrooms to be divided, for the fact that, unfortunately for us as media in Ghana too, we've had journalists who've also have been politicians who've been giving licenses to run media, so some of the media houses are not professional. But it's a shame, and sometimes you find people who, presidents who themselves have been at the forefront of pushing media freedoms, like our current president. You take the former president, President Mahama, also, also was at the forefront, a friend of the media. But we saw very recently, even one of his, on his campaign tours.
Is it surprise you then? I'll come to that personally because I think that's a key thing. It surprised you then, in the wake of all that has happened, the only thing we've heard from the current president is a tweet?
Well, you see, fortunately, his statement was comforting, but you would wish that we would hear more than just the tweet, and something that is a bit more forceful. Maybe you could say that for once we're seeing the police do things that they've not done before. Maybe it's a result of what it is that he's saying to them. But it is important for us to signal. And the signaling is very, very important. The reason why a lot of us would obey the laws is because we know that there are consequences for doing things we do. But when it is that, as the West African Media Foundation has rightly said, that the state itself has failed, and would even say they have nurtured what it is that is happening over the years, we need to see our leaders being frontal. I am happy that I've heard President Mahama, ex-President Mahama, issue a statement. Where was he? We did a strong statement like this when one of his own were beating people. And even with that case, we're not too sure what has happened to that.
Doesn't that bring up the political aspect to this? So that now he's in opposition, this obviously noise in his favor to say something about it and ask for action. When he was the president, you rightly say, and you mentioned it, in fact, Ashigbey was in fact, the evidence was there, he did assault a journalist. Nothing happened. We have this current president as well, under whose watch MPP headquarters, people were assaulted. His own member of parliament, like a senior member of the party, publicly invites harm on the journalist. No condemnation from him. Is the politics part of the problem?
The politics is even the reason why sometimes there's inertia from journalists to act, because we've all been divided along partisan lines that, you know, sometimes I ask myself, where's Ghana in all of this? Because we need to be talking about Ghana so that right is right, wrong is wrong. And we need people to be able to speak up when these things are happening. And it's, you know, it's not only just the politicians, it's also the professionals. Because we've had situations where professional people have also done the military, the police, when they do the assault, that's not partisan. We've also had situations even when pastors themselves, you know, have, you know, church people have gotten involved in it. As Samojan's brother, when that happened, you know, so it is, the only unfortunate thing is that we expect the police and the security actors to act when these things happen. But they themselves, because their hands is full of blood, you know, they themselves have done this beating up themselves. It's difficult for them to act. And I think that this offers us an opportunity for all of us, police, everybody who's involved in it, to look at this again. Because, you know, the interesting thing, when the state, when the system is against anybody, it doesn't matter whether you're a policeman, you're even a journalist, you know, we all run to this fourth estate of the realm. So it's important that we all be seen to be protecting this, because media freedom is our freedom of speech, our ability to be able to talk.
I know the thing that beats me, Suale. The journalism, the media, is arguably the only profession that has a whole chapter in the Constitution dedicated to a chapter. So people forget that. You look at all the professions in this country. We have a whole chapter in the Constitution dedicated to our work. If the Constitution can do that in a country, I mean, as a country, 1992, we decided that this profession that we are in is so important that we need to create a whole chapter for it. Why are we 20-something years down the line, where we now have a holiday to celebrate the Constitution, talking about this, when the state is complicit in what we are talking about? It beats me, seriously.
Well, I think that you raised an important point about highlighting the media's provisions in the Constitution. And I was raising the same thing this afternoon, and somebody said, well, you see, that is why nurses are not the ones being beaten, or teachers are not the ones being beaten, and so on. And so it is because of the important role that the media have to play in a democratic environment. That is why, and of course, the Constitution is all about, you know, rule of law and establishing a state that is governed democratically. And therefore, you know, if you look at globally, we keep talking about the fourth estate of the realm being the media. So if there are provisions for the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, then of course there must be a provision for the media. And I keep saying that, look, when we talk about journalism, every aspect of good journalism would hurt someone. You know, so if you choose to do good journalism, or if we all say, look, if we had a critical media environment, a lot of the things that are happening wouldn't be happening in our country. Our country would have been a different country altogether. What we're calling for is the type of journalism that, when it is done, necessarily would hurt somebody, because it's about exposing corruption by someone. It's about exposing wrong deals that people have. Government contracts that are shrouded with secrecy, and so on and so forth. And I think that as a country, we must begin to accept that journalism is not about writing in favor of the MPP or NDC. Journalism is not about praising Mahama or praising Akufo-Addo. Journalism is about the interest of the state. And in doing so, people would sometimes feel offended, you know, based on what comes out.
But what you're suggesting now, it appears to me that in the wake of Suale and others, seem to be a dying breed of journalism in this country. I tell you what, this weekend, I saw my grandma for the first time in a long time. He says he called my grandfather and to him to tell me that I should quit the job and do something else. And I'm not the only journalist, at least in this office, who's had a parent or some loved one tell him that find something else to do. It can get to you. Right? In fact, I don't know whether Kukuba will permit me to say this, on the show on Whilst We Do Ghana Connect on this last week. He sent me a message and said, in essence, we should not, because the whole intention, he believes, of the people who did this to Suale is to sort of put us in a situation where we can't do what you are suggesting. And so he says, terrified maybe, but subdued and conquered no. Stay strong and focused, brother. I appreciate your point, though. Because I told him what my grandmother had said, right? That what you suggested is great. This is what we should be doing. But in the wake of what is happening, people are afraid to do what you're suggesting that we do. What journalism is really all about. Isn't that the biggest threat or consequence of the conversation we are having? That there are few people out there who believe they can do something like this and push all of us into a place where we are no longer as critical and as daring as people like Ahmend Suale, Manasseh, and co are.
Well, so that's precisely the objective of those who do these things.
Okay.
And therefore, if we were to say, okay, the right thing to do is to self-censor, I'm not going to do all the critical things and so on and so forth, then you accept that you've been defeated and they have their way. And that is why, as a country, we mustn't allow that to happen. As a country, we shouldn't continue to nurture and grow the culture of impunity that has been, that we've witnessed over the last 4, 5, 6 years, or even since the beginning of our, Fourth Republican Constitution. But indeed, we are seeing a pattern that is growing now. And the objective, clearly, from the UN level, from UNESCO level, is that where we allow the culture of impunity to thrive, the consequence is self-censorship and poor journalism. And therefore, and it's something that happens not even within the journalistic realm alone. Look, any objective-minded Ghanaian will tell you that it is so difficult to speak up the truth in Ghana today.
True.
Because whatever you say, people are going to look at you and find out, is this guy
MPP
NDC
or NDC?
So it takes that determination to say, look, I'm a Ghanaian, I have the right to speak, and I will speak my mind. I am driven by my conscience and not by what people would say. And that is the only...
hard to do in
exactly.
Ghana today.
And I believe that is what journalists in this country would also have to come to terms with. Because whatever you do, and for me, look, once a government is in power, let's say for 2 years, what really is the business of media organizations or journalists focusing 90% of the time about a government that, lost power, but in doing so, you are seen as, oh, this guy is a pro-NDC guy. Why is he always talking about the MPP? Or why is he always talking about the government in power? But really, we are all under the government's care.
When we return from the break, we're going to focus a bit more on the second point that Media Foundation for West Africa highlighted in their statement today, which is the personal responsibility. And the third one is what?
So the second one is the initial on the part of we, the media fraternity, and the third one is what we call undignified compromises.
Okay. Or, in fact, focuses on us. Ken will tell you his own story about the undignified compromise that he had to face when he was head of graphic, when he had gone there, a man who was determined to get justice for his own employee, and there was, I dare say, an undignified compromise that tied his hands and couldn't do much. That's what we focus on when we return from the break. What can we do? If the state is failing, we are so powerful that sometimes I wonder why we haven't roared with all the powers that the Constitution gives us. Stay with us here on PM Express. When we return, we'll be delving into that. We're also live on PM Express, guarding the fourth estate. We've explored how important this fourth arm of government is. It's in the Constitution, a whole chapter. Read it, chapter 12. It gives the media powerful responsibility as far as this whole enterprise of running a democracy is concerned. So why are we, I know many of you are asking the question, and Suale rightly pointed out, why are we linking this automatically? We are not. We're just proceeding with what the police itself seem to be doing. The police, they've issued 2 statements in this started. In all the statement, the police itself is focusing quite heavily on Suale's work as an undercover investigative journalist. That's what they're doing so far. At least the statements affirm that. And the one that was issued tonight has even extended the investigations beyond Ken Agyapong to Kwesi Nyantakyi, and obviously, for obvious reasons, because he mentioned Suale in his statement to the police in the wake of his own exposure as a corrupt individual within the GFA settings, and that's why he's been interrogated, and that's why it's necessary to have this conversation. But even if we don't disregard that, he is a colleague, and we are solidarizing with him, and so we will have this conversation and maybe push it further and see if we can get some results. Let's come to what I said we're going to be focusing on a bit more. So the 2 other points that you raised today, I'm so interested in our personal responsibility and in dignified compromises. Explain them.
So first of all is what we consider to be inertia on the part of the media. And by media, we're talking about journalists, media organizations, and other workers, because there are other workers who, technically speaking, may not be journalists. For example, you have drivers who, take you to your various destinations of assignments and so on and so forth. These are media workers. Now, over the years, one critical area or one difficulty we have had in our work towards promoting the rights of journalists, promoting safety of journalists, has been the apathy and the disinterest among media organizations and journalists themselves when colleagues are attacked. As I said, over the last 4 years, we have documented 62 incidents of attacks. In many of these cases, when a statement is even put out there, perhaps the organization of the victim may pick it up and do a story about it, and that ends the matter. In other cases, we have had cause to file petitions, and in fact, sometimes even getting the identities of the true identities of the victims from their media organizations can be a hell. Reference can be made of that attack at the MPP headquarters. 4 journalists, we got to know that. Now, we wanted to establish what are the true names of these journalists who were victims. And there was one particular media organization that we kept calling. The editor would say, look, we are still looking into it, and all we want are the names of the victims. Yes. And it took days and several calls for us to be able to establish that with this media organization. When we filed the complaint at the MPP headquarters, we got no response. To the IGP refers the matter to CID. We go, put down our statements, and CID says, well, without the victims themselves cooperating, we can't make any headway. And that happens to be the end of the matter. So if we ourselves as journalists and as media organizations don't show that kind of commitment, because we have the capacity to set the agenda for the state to consider safety of journalists as a high priority and a high profile issue. So that when incidents like that happen, instantly you would find the state acting. But we ourselves now have positioned the issue as though, oh, it's a normal thing. One journalist has also been beaten. Oh, is that so? Tamale, Radio Justice attacked. Cars and motorbikes bent down. Nothing happens. Police beat up our colleague, Latif. And then several others. In fact, out of the 62, about 70% of the perpetrators happens to be security agents. So either military personnel or predominantly the police. And yet, nothing happens. And it is because we as journalists take it as cool. Oh, no problem. Let it pass.
And then dignified compromise?
Well, that, I think, the example you mentioned, we've had several instances where while we are there making noise, exerting pressure, and all of that, the victims go back door, get sorted out, and nothing happens. I'm not saying that it happened, but Ken can recall when he was Ashigbey. Yes.
I think for me,
the incident involving Kenu.
Yes,
in
the
Kumasi.
blood of.
We know about the Ayaruga incident. We don't know what has happened. And several others. We know about the Standobe issue. Where we kept petitioning. GBC was quiet. In fact, the victims' bosses were speaking on behalf of government. So when the victim himself was saying, look, the car was overspeeding, we had his bosses saying that is not true because somebody who was not in the car said, no, the car was not speeding.
But Ken, I need to ask you this. Shouldn't you just give up on this?
No, we can't give up. You know the reason why we can't give up?
And wait for the next one.
You know the reason why we can't give up? Because
it's a harsh question to ask, but in the wake of all that I've just heard, I can't help but ask it.
We can't give up. The only thing we need to do is to be empowered. The reason why we can't give up is because this is what those perpetuators want us to do. They want us to give up. And even for those who perpetuate this, they come to us for support when, they are pushed, by the wall. But I want to recount that issue about Kenu. And reading the statement that Suale's team put together really encapsulates the challenges that we face and the way to be able to deal with this. Because, you see, if you have a situation where as managing director, you are in court, open court, And that is when your journalist comes to tell you that, you know what, gives you some cock and bull story about his mother and all of that, so they're withdrawing the case. And then you come back to, because you see, you have vicarious responsibility for his safety. If anything had happened to him at the Kumasi, the Babaya Sports Stadium, you would have been in big trouble. You would have had to sort him out. And it's something that happened in Graphic. Let me tell you an example. In Graphic, one of my reporters currently has lost his sense of smell because he was beaten up by the police in Ho. So when you know all of this, then you can't stop. And so you come in and then you say that no, for doing this, for going behind the whole the company and
corporate
then
entity.
Exactly, corporate entity, and going to, you know, so you set up a committee.
You act against the corporate entity.
So you set up a committee, and the committee the findings of the committee shows that the rules that have been stated by the company, he's gone against them, and the punishment for that is dismissal. Then you have the situation where you are then hauled before the media commission, and you have senior journalists enforcing the rules, and then you are made to, you know, readmit him back in the company. That is what perpetuates this. And it's the reason why, for me, I think we all need to be angry about this thing. And we should allow the adrenaline that is flowing out of the fear of what has happened, rather to galvanize us to say, how do we deal with all of this? And so when Suale raises the fact that, you know, we have this unhealthy compromises happening, I am expecting media houses then to also be responsible, to say that we are going to work on providing security for our journalists. We are going to be able to train our journalists so that in terms of even evidence collection, when these things are, because sometimes when these beatings are happening, there are other journalists there. It's surprising that they won't train their cameras over this thing and be able to gather the evidence and know when to be able to send the evidence. We need to be able to get lawyers that will support us when these cases go to court. We know that when it comes to the criminal justice system, it is the state that has to be prosecuted. But we can get lawyers who have waiting brief, who will sit in court, so that the AG's department will know that we are also watching this. And we can get to the point when that is happening, all the media gets into court and we make sure that we're reporting that. And then the media houses would have to hold their journalists who go behind and accept these things. And we need to get to the place where we get the culture that even if we were going to settle out of court, let that settlement be done but presented in court so that the court will document it, so that it becomes public record. So these are some of the things that we need to do to be able to address this. But I think at this particular point, we all, even if, you know, that if we're able to establish, and you know, in as much as we deal with our heads, we also deal with our guts. And as a leader, I can tell you that I feel that this thing is related somehow. But we definitely would want the police to be able to do their investigation.
I mean, the police,
yes,
so far, that's what they are pursuing, the line of...
But even if that happens, we need to say that with this particular one, the way we've been dealing with this thing has to completely change.
But that is my next question, really.
Yes.
How do we approach this differently from the others that we've talked about? We've talked a lot. And I was thinking through with some of my colleagues today, because everybody's trying to figure out, since our conversation on Friday, what do we do differently? One of the shortest ways, some people suggest, is that maybe form a different group and come under the GJ nonetheless, but this is a different group with a defined agenda. First thing you do is, let's do a peaceful protest demanding justice for Suale and the others. Present a petition. Because we cover protests all the time. It's one of the ways of putting pressure. I make it a regular Friday occurrence. We know how the likes of Occupy Ghana use that to great effect. Every Friday, every journalist across the country dedicating a portion of the media time, newspaper, whatever, to raise this concern. Several strategies that we can use have been thrown up. What's your own thinking about these? What do we do differently now?
Well, I think you've rightly mentioned a number of them. What we need to do perhaps different is that we have to get to the point where the state cannot fail to investigate. Okay. Indeed, going to court on behalf of journalists is something that we are familiar with, even beyond Ghana. Last year we were happy when the new government of the Gambia decided to fulfill the court, judgments that had been delivered that Jammeh said he wouldn't comply. Okay. And so compensations of $100,000, $200,000 have been paid to families. Okay. Now, in one instance, the court determined that the state of the Gambia failed to discharge its responsibility as a state by failing to thoroughly investigate the death of the journalist. Okay. And I think that on this particular occasion, unless we are, I mean, it is proven to us that the state has done what it has to do. We have that, opportunity to say, okay, we are filing a case against the state of Ghana because it has failed to investigate this particular matter as we deem fit. And that opportunity is there. Now, I think at this stage, what is really crucial, I mean, some of the things that you've mentioned, how can we make sure that the pressure is on? Yeah. The government feels the pressure. It has the responsibility to investigate, and the police do what they have to do. We are in this country. Then I was young, when there was this police officer who used to do this karate, ninja and so on and so forth. You know, he was murdered.
Buried under concrete.
Yes.
Buried under concrete.
Buried under concrete. It is this same police institution that was able to discover, investigate, and discover even where
they
he was
found him buried under concrete.
And I have confidence that if our police institution decides to work, they are highly professional and they can discharge their mandate. Except that, as a senior police officer recently said, sometimes it is difficult because of the politics. And sometimes what they do is just political stuff to placate the public. I am confident and hoping that on this occasion, we wouldn't be seeing things that are being just done just to ameliorate, the public pressure and the complaints and so on and so forth, but thorough and prompt investigations as they've issued. That's what I think we can hope for, and the pressure must continue. And we have what it takes as a media, the media in this country, to mobilize the public, to mobilize ourselves, to demand what is right, not just for the deceased, but for the media community in the country. Because today it is him, the next time it could be somebody else.
Again, what structure should this take? I mean, the existing structures have not helped us. So I'm just wondering whether we should still use them, or we should form a different one and invite them to sort of, because they're already existing and have name recognition, whatever. Well, what's your thing?
Well, I think that
something has to change.
Definitely something has to change. So as we said, we could decide that we'd use the umbrella of the GJA, but we need to get different people, elements coming in, and the focus should be on just this particular thing, fighting this canker. And I agree with Suale that it is about pressure, and I completely agree that the police, the security officers would be able to do it, but they won't do it without the pressure. We need to keep that pressure on them. So we need to convene. We need to convene and have a strategy that is documented, that says that if we do this, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. And actually try and, we might not be able to get all the journalists coming together. No. All we need is a critical mass of a few people coming together and say, these are the things that we're going to do. Definitely, we need to do peaceful demonstrations. We need to be able to use our medium. So if it's every Friday that we're going to say that there's a page that we're going to start doing a countdown of how many days exactly it's been since this has happened, the reportage that we have to do, if we're going to get to a particular point where we then get on the street, do the marches, send the petitions, make sure that we galvanize both internal and external forces to put pressure, just like the way laser is able to cut. It is just relentless pressure, but it has to be controlled. It has to be coordinated very effectively across the country. We have seen what we've been able to do with Tudan Cobra using, the media coalition. But this is not only about us. It's about our whole country. Everything we have, this whole democracy, depends on this particular one. So our call definitely to all the media is, let's start this. I know we've started some conversations going on. We'll call on for money. Immediately, let's convene as quickly as possible using the same forum, but getting the people, the willing people who are bold enough to want to be able to do this. And learning, fortunately for us, we have Suale's organization who have seen it happen in other places. We're calling on various professional organizations, definitely the Bar Association, we would need it because there's a legal aspect to this fight that we really need to fight. We're calling on...
And the thing about the Bar, we have a president of the GBA who used to be a lecturer at the GIJ and the School of Communication Studies, Tony Fossing taught me media law. And so he's so into media already, and I don't think at all that he will be against what you're suggesting. So we can sit together with them and plot this, because it has to be very comprehensive.
Very, very much so, and we need to be doing this thing latest by the second week of February. We need to have a plan that is out there that we are executing. And I'm telling all the people who want to divide our front that nothing is going to divide our front, because this is epoch. This is beyond this. We are not going to go beyond this. What else is beyond death? Yeah. It's not going to happen again. So we are going to galvanize ourselves, and I will be knocking on the doors of everybody till we are able to convene this thing and make this happen. And as we say, we don't need a large number to be able to make the change. Just a few of us, and I'm pretty sure that people will come on board and we will be able to do this. You'll be surprised the president might join us on the streets where we decide
absolutely. We might even visit him at the Flagstaff House, Jubilee House, and present a petition, knowing his record in repealing one of the most abhorrent laws that had gagged the press in the past. We know if we rope him in, he will join, and we'll be taking names. I've said to my colleagues already. Once the platforms and the means have been communicated, we'll be taking names of journalists. Just put your name there and indicate your commitment to this, and we will start this process actively. We've done that for many people. People call us all the time and say we've not been paid our salaries, and we'll fight for them. And yet, when it comes to ourselves, we just seem to give up quite easily. Never again, we say. Suleiman, thank you very much for joining us. Ken Agyapong, thank you very much also. Watch this space. We are taking back what has been lost, and in fact, simply going on and annexing for ourselves what the constitutional word said: freedom and justice. My name is Evan Spencer. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of PM Express. Enjoy the rest of your evening.